this month's monthly webinar. It's not the gut fault. So before we begin, I just have some housekeeping to let everyone know. There's a couple of announcements. I had all the activities that is upcoming with the support and education team. Just want to bring everyone up to speed. This month is Lupus Awareness Month. May 10th was World Lupus Day. There was a number of CAHN-Pro, Niagara Falls, etc. was lit up for World Lupus Day. This Friday, May 21st, is Put On Purple Day. We are encouraging everyone to put on purple and post your pictures on the Lupus social media. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, and we have Twitter. This is to bring awareness to lupus. June 15, we will be having our webinar. We have our guest, Colleen, will be doing the webinar, makeup and skincare, getting ready for summer. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for that. I would also like to take a moment and just thank Jeremy. He does the recording. So just so you know, we are being recorded just for privacy purposes. These webinars are recorded and then they're posted on the Lupus Ontario website for future viewing. Jeremy has been really amazing putting these presentation and the recordings online. Go to lupusontario.org/education and those are available there. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for all you do. So tonight we have our special guest, Lorene, with us, and I would like to ask Kathy Farron to do a special introductory of Lorene for us, and then we will begin.
Hi, everyone. Lorene Sauro has been a holistic nutrition professional for 20 years and a food professional for 30 years. As co-founder of the Canadian Holistic Nutrition Conference and the Canadian Association of Holistic Nutrition Professionals, CAHN-Pro, she has taught hundreds of holistic nutrition students and graduates, helping them with their educational and professional needs. She is a teacher at the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, CSNN, a food developer, an acclaimed speaker and published author. It was my great privilege when I went to CSNN to have her as my instructor for several courses, and then again to take postgraduate studies with her. It's been a riot. It was Lorene's struggles with endometriosis that led her to study holistic nutrition at CSNN. She has spent years reading the research on gut health, which has helped her solve her problems and helped many others, as it is now understood to be the underlying imbalance with all health conditions. She founded the Healthy Gut, Healthy Hormones, Mastering Online Workshops, and Simply Fermentation programs for practitioners to help provide accurate information and the latest research about food and the wellness industry today to her fellow professionals. She received the Lifetime Achievement Award from CSNNAA in 2017. In this talk, Lorene, RHN, will discuss how gut health issues are connected to the development of many health issues, including autoimmune diseases, and how foods do not cause gut problems. Gut problems cause food issues. Discover the information that can help you restore your ability to choose the foods you enjoy. Welcome, Lorene.
Thank you, Kathy, for that lovely introduction. And thank you, Sandra, and the Lupus Foundation for having me. I'll just get right into it since I have a fair bit to cover and I know I have a time commitment that I have to hit here. So this is the agenda for tonight. I'm going to talk to you about issues with the current approach to autoimmunity, understanding the underlying cause, the gut connection, and why it's not the food's fault. And then I'll give you some helpful tips. So if you have, and I'm sure you have been reading about autoimmunity, you know it's a bit of a minefield. And maybe you're confused, or maybe you're just wondering, you know, which approach is best, or that sort of thing. You know, there's just so much information out there. It's hard to really get one consistent school of thought or idea as to what you can or cannot do. And many practitioners, especially today, are focusing on restrictive food protocols as the answer. And I actually, not just myself, but my colleagues as well, we come across people who've been put on these super restrictive protocols and they don't know what to eat. And it isn't actually helping them per se. So I don't know how we kind of arrived at this. This wasn't the approach for autoimmunity when I graduated 20 years ago, but it seems to be what they're doing today. But what I'm going to share with you tonight is that they're looking in the wrong direction. So I'm going to share with you some information that I hope will be helpful. So first of all, to understand why foods are not responsible for health issues, we have to look at autoimmunity first. And understanding how the body should work and why it went astray is the key to learning more about, how we ended up where we're at. It doesn't matter what your health condition is. I always want to know why, right? I had endometriosis. I wanted to know why. And this is why I find gut work so interesting. And when we do this, you're going to see it's not about food. And so let's just talk a little bit about autoimmunity, and then hopefully this will help paint the picture as well. Okay, so this means if we can answer why, we have a potential to prevent and arrest. So the first step for an autoimmune condition is to arrest it. If you can stop the progression, then you're buying time to figure out more answers that may help with, improvement. The second is to repair the body. This is a bit iffy depending on how long the person's had the autoimmune condition and what autoimmune condition it is. So for example, in rheumatoid arthritis, if the joints have been destroyed, even if you arrest the condition, and that means they're not going to progress, the joints that have been destroyed are not necessarily going to come back. And I only say not necessarily because, we never know anything. We never know what they're going to learn and how to fix things. But trust me, I have osteoarthritis in my left hip, and I've been trying for 20 years to put back the cartilage that's missing, and it's not happening. So I'm not giving up, but as of now, I don't think it's going to repair per se. So in the past, and this still exists today, the rationale for autoimmunity was about a malfunctioning immune system. They talk about the immune system being overactive to the point of attacking the body. So in other words, it kind of went crazy. And a lot of the strategies for autoimmunity are about avoiding anything that stimulates the immune system. And stimulates is a term that's used, but as you're going to see, it's probably not the best term, because what they're talking about doesn't technically stimulate. It usually is helping function. So they don't want to help the function of the immune system like the immune system is doing something it shouldn't do. If you fast forward, and I'll explain that in a minute too. If you fast forward a few years, and this was in the alternative community, they started talking about it not being overactive, but it being underactive or undernourished. And basically what they were saying is that people were reacting to allergies and toxins all the time. Maybe they weren't eating enough nutritious food to keep the immune system healthy, and it left it weak and confused, so that it would, instead of attacking a pathogen, it decided to attack body tissue. As it turns out, there's a major player involved that determines if the immune system is going to play nice in the body. It is our good gut microbes. And amongst their many responsibilities is that they deliver something known as immune tolerance to food, to body tissue, and to everything that should not be attacked. And when we talk about dysbiosis, this is the first place they look now with regard to studying autoimmunity. So dysbiosis is too many bad microbes and not enough good. And current research is now looking at specific strains of bacteria being a factor for specific health issues. Now, when we talk about bacteria and we talk about microbes in the gut, this is a very complex topic. Right now, as it exists, there are no standard tests for strains of bacteria that could be of value to you as a person with a health issue, or even if you just wanted to see how you were doing. Most of the tests, the best they can do is species. And sometimes they can't even do that. Sometimes they're on the genus level. And so this is why it's so complex. Everybody is different. The strains that are in me are different from the strains that are in you. They may have similar overlaps. They do similar things, but they're just a little bit different. And then there is the composition of the strain. So how many are helping us and how many might have the potential to hurt us. So this is where a lot of the research is going. And they give it this nice name of dysbiosis. And if you research, if you go online looking for studies for different health conditions and you type in, I usually type in study abstract dysbiosis and then the name of the health condition, you'll find studies for just about everything that they have found dysbiosis to be present in the person's gut when they have a health condition. A lot of this research is specific to autoimmune conditions. So that's the good news. They're doing a lot of research with that right now. Now, what's the cause of dysbiosis? Well, antibiotics. So antibiotics obviously are targeting both good and bad bacteria, but for whatever reason, which they don't quite understand, when it comes to recovery after the course of antibiotics, the bad recovers faster than the good. And this is where you start to set the stage for dysbiosis. There's other drugs that can cause problems in the gut. But they do it over a slower, longer period of time. So you're more likely to see that being an issue when somebody's on a medication for a long period of time. A diet that consists of processed refined foods and lack of pre and probiotic foods. And then what we're exposed to. So it could be man-made toxins, so chemicals in our food and our environment, or naturally occurring things like LPS. So LPS is something that is a toxin that is produced by mainly pathogenic bacteria. And if it gets into the bloodstream, it has been found to be in different locations of the body where disease occurs. So in liver disease, they find it in the liver, in the brain, they find it in the brain. You know, it's found throughout the body depending on what the health issue is. Stress and negative attitudes can lower beneficial bacteria. Excessive physical exercise, like you might see with somebody doing marathons or triathlons. And again, when we say that, if they're doing something to compensate for what they're doing from an excessive perspective on a, support the gut way, then maybe we wouldn't see this, but they don't because this has not been looked at before. Surgeries, air flight, x-rays, lack of sleep. You can see that a lot of the things that we go through in modern life are affecting our gut. Chemotherapy and radiation, of course. And dysbiosis is a major factor leading to changes in intestinal permeability, which some people call leaky gut. There's more to the leaky gut story. It's not what most people think it is because it's one of those terms that has just been misused. It's not holes in the gut lining like everybody thinks it is. It refers to what I call gates. They're called gap junctions, but I call them gates between the cells that can open or close. And they are supposed to open and close. The question is, do they open too often and do they stay open? So leaky gut's a bit misunderstood. So this is what's going on. Our microbes interact with the adaptive immune system constantly. In order for them to stay in our system, the immune system has to be able to recognize them as foreign, but not pathogenic. The immune system constantly tests the microbes using cells located in the intestinal wall lining. And there's many ways in which the gut microbes affect the immune response. So they like to create these germ-free mice and do these studies. And in one study, they found that mice that were germ-free had a lower number of immune cells than normal mice. When they introduced bacteria into the young mice, it allowed for them to quickly gain immune cells. But when they did it to adult mice, it didn't happen. So this is setting up the idea that perhaps our early exposure and building of our gut bacteria when we're born determines how we will be later in life. I don't really like this concept, and I'm not convinced that this is an absolute. But as we understand it now, the better a start you got in life, the better you will be later in life. But I'm finding new research coming out that shows the gut bacteria is a little more resilient than they think. So we'll see where they go with that. And the total relationship that's going on here is not known. So this is what they're studying. So this brings us to the concept of immune tolerance. And it refers to the lack of reaction by the immune system to a substance or body tissue. So when it comes to autoimmunity, immune tolerance is what determines whether your immune system will attack body tissue. Babies in the womb have immune tolerance, gut microflora have immune tolerance, and then everything else. So every food, every cat, dog, pollen, all body tissue must be given immune tolerance, and this is controlled by the gut microflora. And so this is why the concept that either the immune system is overactive or underactive is flawed, because typically what it means is that the immune system's just doing what the immune system does, but because the immune tolerance isn't what it should be, is why people are seeing the results they're seeing. It isn't really about overactive or underactive. And so what this means is we would be experiencing immune reaction to everything we are exposed to if we didn't have immune tolerance. So what gives immune tolerance to us? Something called T regulatory cells. They promote anti-inflammatory cytokine, which suppresses self-antigen T cell activity, and they modulate the immune system and maintain tolerance despite the presence of self-antigen T cells, which is what is involved with autoimmunity. They are produced in higher numbers to enable control and protect immune tolerance by suppressing these self-reactive T cells. And studies show that depletion of Treg cells in normal mice immediately induces autoimmune disease and irritable bowel disease. Self-antigen T cells are implicated in type 1 diabetes, lupus, MS, and rheumatoid arthritis. And that's just to name a few of the autoimmune conditions, but these are some of the ones that they're studying the most. And without the control exerted by Treg cells, we all have the potential to develop an autoimmune disease. So again, it's showing that it's not something specific to the immune system being overactive or underactive. It's about something not being in high enough numbers within our immune system. So what's the gut connection? Treg cells are produced in the intestines by naive T cells that are produced in the thymus. And the way this happens is you have metabolites that are created by good bacteria. One such one is called butyrate. It's a short chain fatty acid. And this is what helps the Treg cells develop. So this means potentially autoimmune diseases and allergies, because this involves allergies as well, can be resolved in the intestinal immune system. And having sufficient good bacteria is the key to maintaining a normal response in order to promote Treg cells. The maintenance of immune balance by the gut is the key to preventing and resolving autoimmunity. So what's the path to autoimmunity? Number one, dysbiosis may be present. Number two, there should be a genetic susceptibility. So a lot of autoimmune conditions have a genetic marker, but it's not the gene that's important, it's the gene expression. So just because you have a gene doesn't mean you're going to get the condition. I have the RF factor in my blood for rheumatoid arthritis. I do not have rheumatoid arthritis. There can be environmental triggers like toxins, stress, undigested food molecules, lack of sleep, all affect gut health and can play a role in developing dysbiosis. And then often leaky gut is present. It's more likely to occur with those who have the previous three factors, but this is a dynamic and reversible process. So just because you have leaky gut does not mean you are stuck with it. So where are we with regard to how people approach protocols? Well, from an alternative perspective, they're pulling the foods out like it's their fault. And from the conventional perspective, it's more new drugs and more drugs targeting the symptoms. No one really considers the underlying cause, except for researchers, and that's the good news, is that somebody is trying to actually find answers, and hopefully we will have more soon. The big thing to take away from all this that I just presented is that autoimmunity is not supposed to happen. So when it does, we should be asking why, and then try to see what we can do to stop it and possibly reverse it. So what can we make of all this? Clearly, the dysbiosis connection to autoimmunity is being established in the research. However, what is emerging is that lack of diversity of strains of bacteria, and then what types of strains are being linked to specific types of autoimmune conditions. So they're finding certain strains of pathogenic bacteria that someone with lupus might have, and other pathogenic strains that somebody who has MS might have. And this is true for other health issues as well. So this does not help once a person has the autoimmune disease, but it makes a great case for why we need better diet and lifestyle changes to prevent autoimmunity. In the meantime, good gut health work is essential, and we get to use food and not just supplements or drugs to help us with managing any autoimmune condition we have. In terms of lupus, I did find a study, a mouse model for lupus that showed that lupus mice had lower levels of lactobacillus and higher levels of a type of Clostridia and lactospiricide than controls, and that the levels increased as the disease progressed. So here's another reason why you want to do gut health work. Gut health deteriorates as the disease deteriorates. So as the dysbiosis increases, the disease progresses. So if you want to stop the progression, you want to deal with the dysbiosis as best you can. Now, the differences were only found in the female mice. And as I'm sure you may be aware, autoimmunity is much more common in women than men. I just looked at these statistics a couple of weeks ago. While there's 8% of the world's population has an autoimmune condition, 78% of the 8% are women. So we're not really sure. The one thing I read about as a possibility was that testosterone may have some type of protective effect.
Yeah.
The same study and others found that probiotics with lactobacillus strains can help mitigate symptoms. So this is good news because that means that perhaps this can be part of the process you use to work on the dysbiosis. So why does food get blamed? Gut health issues also cause food sensitivities. So a lot of people with autoimmunity have food sensitivities, and when the foods are removed, symptoms improve. And the assumption is that the food is causing the issue. But the thing is that the issue that they're trying to solve, the symptoms, usually have an inflammation background. So inflammation is causing the pain, causing whatever symptoms they're experiencing. And so if both foods and autoimmune have inflammatory elements to them, you remove one of them, some of the inflammation is going to go away. And then they make this kind of anecdotal link that it's the food. So when someone feels better on a restrictive food protocol, it could be because they went from a refined food diet to a more whole food diet that included some anti-inflammatory elements in the foods. So that's a possibility. Or, and this is what is more common, because of immune tolerance, the person has food sensitivities and autoimmunity due to dysbiosis, and therefore a loss of immune tolerance. So what we call this is the confounding variable. That's what dysbiosis is. It's causing the food sensitivities and it's causing the autoimmunity. The lack of immune tolerance and autoimmunity. So what this means is that some people don't necessarily have any issues with food and therefore shouldn't be put on a food restrictive protocol at all. And if someone does have food sensitivities, it is unlikely they have it to all the foods that are being removed. And that's probably one of the biggest problems with some of these protocols. Removing a symptom is not the same as fixing the underlying problem. So we want to get at the source of the dysbiosis and do whatever we can to fix that. So as was said earlier, food does not cause gut problems cause food problems. And specific bacteria help you digest food. So if you're wondering where food sensitivities come from and why they develop as a result of dysbiosis, if you do not have the specific strains that are needed to help with that specific food, you may develop a food sensitivity. Now, that specific strains are, there's nothing, when I say specific, we don't know specifically what they are. We just know that everybody is different. Guts are like fingerprints. There's no two the same. You may have some of the strains that help with the specific foods, but maybe you don't have enough, or maybe you don't have any at all. So this is something that will be determined later in life, and we don't have the answers that we need. So if a person is missing specific strains for the specific foods, they're going to be more prone to sensitivities, and they're going to have symptoms. And the goal should be to improve digestion and increase beneficial strains in the gut. So that's what our task is. But if you are not consuming the food that feeds the strains, it's hard to build up the strains to digest the food. And this is why you don't want to remove foods if you don't have to. This is why you want to sort of test out whether these foods actually are an issue, and if there's some other strategies that could maybe help you digest the food better in the short term while you build up the strains in the long term. In terms of diet and autoimmunity symptoms are generally worse for those who follow a Western style diet, and research is confirming that lower calorie, moderate exercise, and more whole foods, especially prebiotic and probiotic foods, can lower inflammatory markers. If you lower inflammatory markers, you lower symptoms. And strategies to make changes to the diet are going to be the goal. In terms of prebiotic foods, you got lots of choices. And ones that you really want to consider are resistant starch foods. So these are things like grains, dairy, legumes, nuts, seeds, potatoes. And by potatoes, I mean white potatoes and sweet potatoes. If you have some digestive issues with one of these foods, one of the options you have is to ferment them first, which will start a pre-digestion process and may be all that you need. I'm not going to say it's always the way it's going to work out, but that has helped a lot of people. Now, bifidobacterium in your colon ferments resistant starch to create the short-chain fatty acids such as butyrate, and this helps feed leaky gut or fix leaky gut and promote the Treg cells we were talking about. So there are other strains that also promote short-chain fatty acids, but the biggest family of them is the bifidobacteria in the colon. And then you have all kinds of prebiotic foods such as tomatoes, broccolis, berries, apples, almonds, kale, spinach, asparagus. This is just to name a few. They contain different types of prebiotics. Are we going to discover that all plants are prebiotic? More than likely, but until they have discovered that, we can't say that. But it doesn't make sense that one plant would have these prebiotics and all other plants wouldn't. It just doesn't make sense. It's part of the plant's structure. And then there's also, they're looking at phytonutrients on the plants that are prebiotic. So phytonutrients are part of the plant's immune system, and they're things like polyphenols, like resveratrol found in red wine and grapes, and anything that's purple and blue and red. And these have shown amazing properties to help the gut bacteria as well. And I'm sure they're going to discover much more about other phytonutrients as well. So what this means is you've got a cornucopia of foods that can help your gut, but you have to eat them. And you have to eat a variety of them. And don't forget your culinary herbs, because they are also good for the gut. And this is what gives us amazing flavor in the food. Dairy products contain something called GOS, which is a type of prebiotic. Lactose is also a prebiotic, by the way, just for the record. But this is one that's getting a lot of study now. They find that this is the one that helps build up the bifidobacteria in babies. And they're starting to add it to formulas for babies who are not breastfed. Obviously, it exists in breast milk, but it also exists in animal milks of any kind. And it helps with cognitive function and depression and anxiety, and it helps you absorb nutrients. So it's getting a lot of study right now. And then some people may have an issue with some of these foods. This could be an IgG issue, which you may be familiar with if you've ever had IgG testing done. or it could be a pancreatic issue. So IgG means that you have a level of IgG antibodies to specific foods in the bloodstream that went through what we call leaky gut. But just because you have a lot of IgG antibodies doesn't mean you have symptoms. If this goes back to the Treg cells, if you have sufficient Treg cells, you will not have symptoms to the fact that you have IgG antibodies. And unfortunately, we don't have a test that measures people's Treg cells. But it could also be you don't have enough pancreatic enzymes along with having dysbiosis, and that could be the reason why you have some kind of sensitivity to the food. Now, fermented foods contribute to good bacteria in the gut. They don't replenish and help you replenish. They just help you while they're there. They're called transient bacteria. So are probiotics. They're transient. They're not native to you, but they can help. But a lot of the fermented foods also contain prebiotics because that's how the bacteria that's in the fermented foods grew in number because they were eating the prebiotics in the food while it was fermenting. And this has been shown to help lower inflammation. And bone broth is also something really nice that can help gut repair. It contains a lot of collagen if it's a well-made bone broth. And this is really good for the, and other nutrients, a lot of amino acids and things like that that are really good for gut repair. Now, in terms of supplements, if I was going to pick one, I would pick plant sterols. They can play a role in supporting the immune system and calming the autoimmune reaction. They have been studied well for autoimmune conditions, and what they do is help stimulate Treg cells and lower inflammation. So that is what you want. Glutamine and glutamine-rich powder foods can be very helpful. That's bone broths, and you can also buy vegetarian glutamine powder for anybody who's vegetarian, and put it in a veggie broth. This is very helpful. And in severe cases, it may be helpful to remove a couple of foods in the short term. I would be very careful because if you don't need to remove the food and you remove it, you're going to take away food for bacteria that you do have. Autoimmune strategies take years, so finding a protocol that you can live with is key. Collagen can be helpful repairing the intestinal wall lining, but it may not be best for joint conditions because there's something called collagen autoimmunity. I haven't come across that with anyone, but I just mention it here just in case. Colostrum is valuable for autoimmunity and has been shown to be helpful in several areas. One is that it contains lactoferrin, which inhibits autoimmune response, and the other is that it contains antibodies that can reduce the development of autoimmunity. It's also antimicrobial, and I haven't discussed this, is that there are things that both foods and supplements you can take that are antimicrobial, and they help get rid of pathogenic bacteria and allow the good bacteria to recover. So this might be something that would be a strategy. And colostrum is also anti-inflammatory. And if you get the PDF slides for this presentation, I included this colostrum pudding recipe because it looked kind of cool. I haven't tried it, but I thought it sounded good, so I thought I would include that. So what you need to remember is every person is different. There is no food protocol that'll work for everyone. Everyone has to figure out what foods work for them, and adding new foods is the keys to building a diverse and healthy gut with plenty of beneficial microbes. And remember, the gut likes exercise, sleep, and no excess stress as well. So don't forget the lifestyle considerations along with the foods. If you're looking for more information, I do have a free gut health startup guide. If you, again, have the PDF slides, you can just click this link and that'll take you to getting the gut health guide. And that is the end of my presentation. And thank you very much. And I'll take any questions that you have.
Okay, Lorene, thank you so much for that. We will open up the chat. So if you do have a question, if you could put it in the chat, and Arshana from the Support and Education Committee will be monitoring the chat. So if you do have any questions, please put it in the chat. We do have some time for questions, so that is great. Again, I would like to take this moment to thank Lorene for coming and volunteering her time for Lupus Ontario. We do appreciate you doing that, Lorene, and that was an amazing presentation. I'm sure there will be lots of questions coming up. But just before, seeing it is Lupus Awareness Month, we do have our president on this meeting tonight. So Linda, if I could just ask you to just say a quick welcome to our members who are here joining us today, this being Lupus Awareness Month.
Hi, Sandra. Hi, everybody. You kind of caught me off guard. I was trying to do something with my out of control hair.
It's fine. It's fine.
But welcome, everybody. And thank you, Lorene, for an excellent presentation. So it's wonderful to see everybody on the webinar. And thank you for coming. And as Sandra mentioned, this is Lupus Awareness Month. We've had lots of activity in press and some radio interviews. So the links to all of these will be showing up, I think, in our newsletter in June and also on our website. So you can have a listen in and see what we've been doing. You probably heard the news that the provincial government has recognized May 10th as Lupus Awareness Day in Ontario. So that's a big step forward for us. We are hoping that now that they've recognized that lupus is a serious disease, that they'll work with us to improve some of the supports and programs for lupus patients. And just want to remind everybody, the Walk for Lupus is coming up. It's in August is our official day, but registration is open right now. So you can register, set up a team, donate, and don't forget, May 21st is Put on Purple Day. So we expect to see lots of photos sent in to us of people in their best purple garb to create awareness for lupus. So I think that's about it. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And thanks again, Lorene, for an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Linda. Okay, so we will open up the chat. And Asha, if you could start with the first question, please.
Okay, so the first question, Jennifer Brown asked, is there a particular brand or type of probiotic that you recommend?
Generally, I have different brands I like. What I would say is make sure it's a good quality, like don't go for the cheapest one. That's number one. Number two, look for multiple strains. So remember, they're going to help you while they're there. And the only way they can help you is if there's a number of them. So I would say minimum 8 strains, but if you can get 10, 11, 12, 20 strains, that's really good. And there are different brands out there. The brands I like Renew Life. I like New Roots Herbal. I like Metagenics. I like Pure Encapsulations. And there's something I'm going to recommend that isn't a supplement, but it's something called the cultured coconut. And you can get it in Ontario. It's from a company in Nova Scotia, and it's a fermented kefir grains in coconut milk with a specific type of yeast that's very beneficial to us, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is essentially what's used in bread and beer and nutritional yeast. We have some people getting phenomenal results from different conditions because it's so high with many strains. So a typical milk kefir, the real kefir, not all kefirs are the real kefir. They have 32 strains naturally occurring with the grains and yeast that are in this symbiotic kefir grain mixture. And that's what they used for this. And I've seen some really good blood test results from people using the cultured coconut. So if I was going to pick something to start with, instead of, because you can experiment with brands if you like, or you can do something like this and see how it works for you. And you start very slow with a small amount and you work up to maybe a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons per day. And it's a lot cheaper than a probiotic supplement.
Okay, thank you for that. The second question we have here is from Gillian, and they are interested in the source of colostrum for the uses that you mentioned.
Well, colostrum is obviously going to be from a cow. So it's Colostrum. It's usually, most of the brands that I've seen, they are very clean cows, for lack of a better way of describing it. So they grass fed and they don't receive any antibiotics or stuff like that. Occasionally you can find an organic one, but clean cows, that's the source.
Okay, and Paulette asked, so doctors are often skeptical of this type of information. How can we discuss from a point of view that they will consider?
Well, first of all, I think you're going to find that as we go forward, this is going to happen less and less. Doctors are becoming much more in tune to what gut information is coming out, more than like, you know, I've been in the alternative world for quite some time and they paid no attention to anything. But when this information about the gut is so powerful that they're paying attention, and while they may not have as much information as they could have because there isn't a proper way to train them, they are more open to it. So what I always tell people, like when I'm teaching my fellow practitioners, is if you want your clients to speak to their medical doctors, provide them with a study, because that's the language that doctors, you know, speak. So all you could, I don't know how good any of you are at finding studies, but I just would Google study abstract and then like immune tolerance and lupus, for example, and see what you find. And often they want the full study, not just the abstract, but this is how you get them to sort of say, okay, they're serious about this and they really want to talk about this. It's the only way we have right now to sort of educate them, because it's not being done collectively, even though I know a lot of their upgrading is covering gut health to some degree. It's just, they need so many pieces before they're convinced, but it's still worth having the conversation with them.
Next question, I think I missed one from Ellen. If taking a probiotic, should you change it over time?
You don't necessarily have to if it's working for you, but I recommend that you do it if you're not sure if it's working for you. Try different ones and see what happens. Especially if they have different strains in them, they may help you more than one helps. Then you know, one helps more than the other. So it's a good idea, and to see which ones your body likes too.
Christine asked, with lupus, they talk about not consuming nightshade vegetables. However, in your presentation, it seems that some of them are favorable. Can you kind of elaborate on that? And I guess she wants to know which ones work and which ones don't.
Well, first of all, there's no proof anything about the nightshades being a problem. That's kind of like an assumption that's been made. It goes back to what I was talking about. People, you know, remove nightshades from their diet and symptoms go away. Well, what it was a food sensitivity to the nightshades. It has nothing to do with autoimmunity. So you could have somebody who has a food sensitivity to a food in the nightshades. One, generally it's not all of them. It could be 2 or 3, who knows? And then they also have an autoimmune condition, and it is a food sensitivity. But I can tell you, because if you Google study abstract tomato and inflammation, what you're going to pull up is studies talking about how anti-inflammatory they are. So there are phytochemicals in tomatoes that are anti-inflammatories, and when they study tomatoes, they find they're anti-inflammatory, not pro-inflammatory. So the only reason a person would have an issue with a tomato is they have a food sensitivity. But that's not the tomato's fault, is it? No. So it's not, this is what it's not the food's fault means, okay? Tomato's just being a tomato. It's just doing its own thing. And then something's gone awry in the person. So if we can work on that, and what that means is that that's a really great test for someone. Right? So if you have a sensitivity to a tomato or any other food, and you start working on your gut health, if you want to see how you're improving, if you can do better with the tomato that you had a problem with before, you know you've made progress. So they actually make a good test, because we don't have a lot of tests to tell you that you're improving, but that's a really good test, right? So yeah, no, the poor nightshades have been blamed needlessly, and everybody is different. So don't, you know, make it a case-by-case circumstance. Make sure the person has the issue, and then you can see what you can do to help your own issues if you have the issue. But if you don't have the issue, you don't have a problem.
Okay, so the next question is, if a child is exposed to antibiotics for years, does it affect adult gut health?
Absolutely. And there's a lot of research coming out about that right now. And, you know, the good news is they're also doing research of how to counter the effects, especially if you have to go on antibiotics. So there's research showing that if you're on probiotics while you're on antibiotics, that helps. There's research showing that if you're on something called Saccharomyces boulardii, which is a type of yeast, that also helps. And what it means is that it helps your own gut bacteria recover faster in comparison to bad bacteria. Because remember, I said bad bacteria seems to recover faster than good bacteria. So there are things you can do. Plus, we're learning more about babies when they're born. So going forward, this should be less and less of an issue. But yes, we do have a lot of people out there whose struggles can be linked back to some degree to their initial multiple courses of antibiotics as a child. That being said, it's not conclusive. So you might have some children who grow into adults who have a lot of problems, but others didn't. And probably what happened to the others who didn't is other things they did growing up. Maybe they had a really good diet that their parents fed them. Maybe they were, you know, maybe there were other factors involved that the kids who grew up with the gut health problems, they didn't have those factors that protected them and other kids did. We know that kids with peanut allergies, we see the antibiotics being a big factor with them. And yet 25% of all kids with peanut allergies outgrow their peanut allergies. Why is that? Obviously something that happened as they were growing was more beneficial to them and allowed them to recover to some degree. So it's not, you know, nothing is carved in stone.
Chital is asking, if you have milk allergies, what can you do to substitute for dairy probiotics?
Well, the cultured coconut would be a big one. There are probiotics out there that have no dairy in them. They're made from other sources. Some are human strains, some are plant strains, some are a combination of human and plant strains. And as long as they don't use any dairy-based fillers, usually the strain itself, even if it originated from dairy, is not usually an issue because it's bacteria. It's not actual, what people react to are either the lactose or the casein, the protein and the starch or the carbohydrate. So, you know, I would go on a case-by-case basis, but there are plenty of probiotics that don't have any dairy in them at all.
Steph is asking, does race or ethnicity affect dysbiosis?
Well, that's a big question. And the answer is, we don't know, but more than likely, we have to take into consideration our origin. So the way the research is right now is if you are closer to the culture that you come from, like you were born outside of North America, you're less likely to have gut problems than if you were born here, no matter what race or ethnicity you are. So that's what we know so far, is that what we do here in North America or in the Western culture, we can include England, we can include Australia, we can include a lot of different cultures where we have this really bad lifestyle and refined processed food diet and stuff. It seems to be affecting everyone, but we are seeing that immune systems are not this equal amongst different ethnicities and races. So then is that because of what they're experiencing where they're living in the North American culture? Or is it linked to their actual genetics? And unlikely it's not linked to their genetics, because bacteria evolves based on what it's exposed to. So that's the good news. But are we going to see discrepancies in different ethnicities and races within North America? I believe we are already seeing it. So they need to take a deep dive at the gut and the gut health per ethnicity and race to help get to the bottom of this, to help the people who are here today. If that makes any sense. Hope that makes sense.
I think it makes sense. Christy is asking, does gut health have anything to do with IBS?
Oh God, yes. Um, any of the intestinal problems is a gut problem. So a lot of the people who have health conditions like autoimmunity, allergies, maybe they have heart disease, maybe they have Parkinson's disease, they often have some type of gut health issue, which could be IBS. IBS has a huge stress component too. So most people have more active IBS when they are stressed. But again, there's been some good research showing that working on your gut health and increasing your good bacteria levels helps with IBS, because again, everything is interconnected. These bacteria are communicating with every part of your body. So there's nothing in your body that can't be affected by gut bacteria. So as long as it's the strains that you need and keep you healthy, that's good. And if when they're not, that's bad. So yes, absolutely.
Okay, Arshana, I think there's, can I just mention a couple of them? There's one that sort of ties in, and then you could go to the next one. Wondering if you could, so Laura Hacks, wondering if you could chat a bit about kombucha. Do you recommend it? And then on the flip side of the, Kathy also mentioned kombucha is full of probiotics. So can you kind of tie those two in?
Okay, so there's a number of fermented foods out there which are full of obviously good bacteria or probiotics. Kombucha is one of them. And what you need to do if you're going to add fermented foods to your diet, and I should say that some people do react to fermented foods because of possible histamine issues, which is also a gut bacteria problem. But if assuming the fermented food does not bother you in any way, shape, or form, then what you want are 2 to 3 different types of fermented foods in your diet ongoing. So you want at least 5 servings and 2 to 3 different kinds. So you could do like 2 kombuchas, 1 yogurt, and 2 sauerkrauts, for example. This is based on a study where they took people who were eating a variety of fermented foods out of their diet, saw their immune system response measurements go down. And then when they reintroduced the fermented foods back in, they had to get up to 3 different kinds, at least 5 servings before their immune system came back to where it was. This was based on healthy people. So kombucha could be a very good thing to choose if you like it. If you don't like it, don't drink it. It's that simple. You got to find what you like.
So the
Okay.
next,
Thank you.
sorry.
No, go ahead, Zarshana. You go ahead and then I'll pick up the next one just to help you along, okay?
Okay. Janet is asking, she has Sjogren's disease and she finds that her symptoms rage whenever she attempts to ease the pain, especially with her dry eyes. Her doctor suggested glutamine and MSM, but it still wasn't working. She suffered with her dry eyes, and she's basically wondering why her dry eyes are always being affected by everything she eats.
Well, that is dysbiosis. This would be something that if you could see an alternative practitioner who could put you on a good antimicrobial, a good probiotic, it might be the cultured coconut would be helpful for you. And then glutamine shouldn't do that, but sometimes we're triggering too much too soon when we try things and there's an imbalance in place. And therefore, this might be why you're reacting like this, because you're not really dealing with the dysbiosis itself. MSM is a very good supplement. That's MSM, by the way, not MSN, just so you know, which is the Microsoft, whatever. But MSM is sulfur, and sulfur is a very important nutrient. But some pathogenic bacteria like sulfur too. So that could also be one of the reasons. I would be surprised if the glutamine was the issue, because glutamine is very anti-inflammatory, but you never know. It could be the way your gut bacteria is set up. Those two you're not getting the benefit from them that you should. So I would look at the dysbiosis first.
Okay, and I know that the presentation is going to be up on the Lupus website, but I was wondering, Marguerite was asking if you could post the link on the last page of your presentation in the chat. I think they want to access it now if they can.
Okay, I will go get it because I should have had it and I always forget to do that. But go ahead, go ahead with the next question.
I think that's all there is from my end. Sandra, did you see anything that I might have missed?
Okay. So Lena just put in a couple of articles about, she just put that in the website. Let's see. Okay, I think there was something from Sarah's. Okay, one second.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah, I
I
see it.
have an IG test, sorry, IgG test done with greatest sensitivities to dairy products, eggs, gluten, and spelt. I have cut these out of my diet for several years. Is it safe to reintroduce them, and how?
Okay, so I think I mentioned that an IgG test doesn't actually tell you if you react to the food. It just tells you the number of IgG antibodies you have. If you have enough Treg cells, then you won't have any reaction to the foods. But let's say you do or you did, okay? The only way to find out is to put one of them in, just do it one at a time, just eat it once and see what happens. If you have had done some dysbiosis work in the meantime, you were reactive to it, you are probably less likely to be reactive to it now. But sometimes people just spontaneously just do better when they've had the food out for a while. You don't know until you try, and there is no official test that's going to help you. It's as basic as, just testing it out and see what happens. So just pick something simple. If I was going to do dairy, I would start with the fermented dairies. I would start with a yogurt and make sure it's a real yogurt. So it's not the ones with the gums and the sugar all added. It's just bacterial culture and milk. If I was going to try the wheat or gluten, I would try a really good quality sourdough bread, right? A lot of people who have wheat issues don't have, or gluten issues, not all people, because if you're celiac, that's a whole other story. But a lot of people who just had a sensitivity to wheat don't have a problem with sourdough bread. So you start with what makes sense. After years of having removed it, the antibodies should be gone anyway. So they shouldn't be causing any issues. It's just what's going to happen when you actually eat the food, because you haven't been, especially with the dairy and the wheat that the gluten's in, those are really good prebiotic foods, and you haven't been eating them. So you may not have enough strains to digest them based on that. It's kind of a tricky situation.
Christy asked, how about a low FODMAP diet?
So the FODMAP diet is essentially a diet which removes all the high prebiotic foods from your diet. So that's what FODMAPs are. They're the prebiotic foods. So it leaves you the low prebiotic foods, but removes the high prebiotics. Again, there's really no science behind it. And it was designed for IBS. But what you want to do is, more than likely, if you have an issue with any of those foods, it's not all of those foods. So if I was on a low FODMAP diet or I'd been on one, I would try entering one food at a time and then figuring out if any of the foods are an issue.
Okay, I think that is it. So Lorene, thank you so much for coming and do this wonderful, informative, and timely presentation for Lupus Ontario. We do appreciate the support that our members are giving us to our guests. Thank you so much for so many of you turning out tonight. Again, is another wonderful turnout, and Lupus Ontario appreciates that. The Support and Education Committee do work hard to try and get topics that are informative and relevant to what our lupus members are going through. And I think this is one of those that definitely do address a number of issues that we have. I do like the title, Gut, It Is Not the Food's Fault. I thought that was very interesting when I saw that, because sometimes, yeah, you think, you have to change everything that you eat, but as Lorene has taught us, that is not always the case. So again, bravo to our members. Again, it is Lupus Awareness Month. Purple, put on purple on Friday, show your colors. I think the Toronto sign will be lit up on Put on Purple Day. And do check your local media again, because we have had a number of interviews done over the time for Lupus Awareness Month. So if there's no further questions, actually, let's just see. I think, did something else come up? 1 second. No, I just think there's a lot of thank you, Lorene, for a very informative presentation. Yeah, just a lot of thank yous. So you being here is greatly appreciated by our members, and we thank you so much. So if there's no more questions, again, any additional information you need or for additional support, you can email support@lupusontario.org. That email is monitor and it is open to all our members. And just before you go, for those of you who are not members as yet, please do sign up for membership. It is free, and when you are a member, you do get invitation to all our ongoing events, as well as what is going on with lupus and with the Lupus Ontario community. So again, thank you so much, Lorene. Thank you so much for everyone for coming out tonight. Please join us. June 15 will be our next webinar. All the information is posted online at lupusontario.org. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.